All right, welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. As you'll notice, I'm not here with Brendan today, but I do have two special guests with me. Welcome, Matt Rogers and Nick Butcher. How you going,
Hey
guys?
guys. Hey.
What's
Thanks
up?
thanks for having us on.
Yeah, excited to have you both here. Matt, obviously, just coming off the back of a calling win a couple of months ago, and actually a Road to Nationals win just yesterday. So, congratulations on that. Good start to the Road
Thank
to
you.
Nationals season.
Yep.
And Nick, you're in solidarity with me here in Sydney. You're also in lockdown, so no Road to Nationals just yet for you, but hopefully soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. So Matt, just wanted to dive in quickly before we obviously we've got a deck tech here for everyone today from a win you pulled out 2 weeks ago at Road to Nationals, but just yesterday you also won a Road to Nationals. So what were you playing in that Road to Nationals? How did it go for you?
Yesterday, yeah, I was playing chain in that one. Nick and I came up with a sort of chain list that was much better against decks that were trying to block us out. And effectively fatigue decks. A chain list was 6 Flock of the Featherwalkers. And yeah, basically allowing you to have go again a lot more. So effectively a bunch more shadow puppetries or something like that in the list, and it went really well. It was seamless. The deck was super consistent. It didn't need to banish. Like it didn't need to get up to banish 8 and 9 and stuff to do massive big turns. It could do them really early on in the game. So you could put on a whole lot of pressure and have them block him with a lot of their hand, sort of when you're at the 4 and 5 banish mark. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Well, good job. Nice we snagged there for you. A couple of extended arc tunics now into your collection.
Yep. Couple of those.
So we're going to talk about the dash deck that you played the week prior. What was the decision before we jump into it to move away from the dash deck for this weekend? Obviously, served you really well on the Sunday prior. Would you go back to this deck again? I'm going to ask you the hard question before we even jump into the deck tech, Matt.
So would I go back to dash again? Yeah. I mean, I love playing dash. But the main reason behind switching is Nick and I had this idea that in the Road to National season, we were going to play a different hero at each Road to Nats to keep it fun and spicy, and then be able to kind of talk about the decks afterwards. That one didn't quite work. I still want to do that. But when the very first Road to Nationals, I played dash and I went 3-4 and it was an outer train wreck. I had to play dash again the next day. I had to fix it and play the deck the next day because I couldn't just leave dash there with, like dead in the gutter, 3-4, the hero's over or whatever. I had to show the world that she was still strong.
Yeah, couldn't leave your girl hanging.
Yeah, couldn't leave my girl hanging. So I decided to play dash again. And then got a win with her, and then I was happy enough to move on to another hero.
Nice. So what you started with Dash. Obviously, she's your OG to an extent. You won the nationals with her, but outside of that, was there any particular reason that Nick and yourself, that you guys chose to start with Dash? Did you think it was like a great meta call? Like, what was the kind of thought process behind what we see here in front of us now?
Nick, do you want to take that?
I guess so.
Because it was kind of you that alerted me that maybe Dash was really good again in the current meta, because I was mucking around with like Bravo and a bunch of other things, and I think I remember you sort of bringing up that, hey, maybe there's a way we can beat Chain and be better against Prism, and then Dash is good again,
Yeah, because everyone was playing Bravo first. I just thought, Dash is just the best matchup.
Yeah,
Bravo, and then it just destroys Prism because you naturally play 6 powers and you have a 10 power in your engine, which helps a lot. And then they can't attack you with heralds, and then you have the pistol, which is the perfect counter to auras and spectral shield. So that's a breeze of a matchup as well. And those are 2 of the most popular decks. And then against Chain, as long as you can find out a way to fatigue them, that gives you such good broad range in those 3 matchups, which are the most popular. But obviously, you have to sacrifice other matchups, which is why you can go 3-4 one day and win an event the next day, because you play the matchups that you want to play against.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, actually, on that, so, you just talked about Bravo, Prism, you felt those are good matchups. What did you face on day 1, or what did you not want to face on day 2? Matt or Nick, what was the deck maybe a little bit softer to?
Yeah, so day one I lost to Kano, which I had
Oh.
absolutely zero hate for whatsoever. I lost to 2 dash decks because I was playing a very kind of mid-range version, and they were playing more aggressive versions. And then I lost to a Prism that was playing plunder runs and stuff against me, and I just didn't draw 6 powers at the right time, and they just were able to just put together these like 20 plus damage turns back to back to back and just completely destroy me. So day one, really, the wheels just came off. It wasn't working. But yeah, I mean, day one I just played against a bunch of aggro decks, right? So the dash build that we had initially was built for a control meta game because we thought everybody was on more controlling Prism decks. Katsu control was getting really popular, and a lot of people were playing Bravo. So we were sort of building for more of a control meta. And in day one, I just played against aggro decks every round and just got smashed. And so that's why for day two, I went and cut the Belittle package, which is an amazing package against control, but considering they all block for 2, if you're against an aggro matchup and you're having a block all the time, it's not going to work out great for you.
Yeah.
So basically went back to the drawing board, came up with a mid-range deck that was just better for the control matchup, relying back on Tome, which is better for the aggro matchup, relying back on things like Tome with life gain and extra cards for extra attacks is just amazing versus aggro. And just kind of a more seamless aggressive thing, making my command and conquers better. So I played Goliath Gauntlet day 2 so that I could make sure that command and conquer for 8 can just shut down the aggro decks. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it makes sense. The Prism high roll is something that I feel people have been, almost everyone's been a victim of so far in this Road to National season at least once.
Well, it was actually funny. On day 2, I played a lot of the same matchups. Like I played Kano again. I played the aggro Prism deck that I lost to on day 1. I played Dash against Dash again. Like I played a lot of the same things, but I just came with a deck that was built for the aggressive metagame rather than for what we thought was going to be a control metagame.
Yeah, cool. So I think it's a really cool story, actually. You know, obviously going down on day 1, but then you know yourself, I'm sure that you both discussed it that evening, made a few changes to the deck, and came back with a stronger list to attack what you basically knew the meta was going to be as consecutive events back to back. You know, people might change the deck slightly, but you sort of knew how you wanted to target the meta going into day 2, and obviously worked really well for you guys. Did you lose any matches on day 2? Did you sweep?
No, I lost to a Prism on day 2. That I think on about turn 3, he popped his Halo, and then played a Tome, drew 3 cards, drew another Tome, played another one, drew 3 cards, played another Tome, drew another 3 cards. Ended up just taking my turn, and then on his turn he just attacked me for it was, I think I worked it out to be like 31 damage or something like that, and like multiple eruditions and drawing cards and everything. It was a horrible turn to play against.
So pretty fair then.
Yeah, very fair.
Cool. And all right, well, I'd love to hear maybe Nick, maybe could you tell us a bit about what the core strategy of this dash deck is in particular? Like, in this, we're sitting here, actually, we've broken it out. We've got the core of Matt and Nick's deck on the side, left-hand side here, and then you've got your side deck over here, which we'll get into. But this, this core, the way you're playing out most of your matchups, what are you actually trying to do with this deck? Is it naturally quite an aggressive deck? Is it naturally controlling?
It does a bit of both, so it just depends on what you're playing against. If you're playing against a high control deck, you have great cards like Octane, which just blow out any control strategy. And then Tome is also very good against those decks as well because they combo well. And then you obviously have it's because your engine requires so little cards because you start with an induction chamber. You can play so many defense reacts and sigils against decks that are going to go hard aggro on you because you just you're like an unmovable wall and you just need 1 blue to actually do damage. So that's why it's so adaptive against all these different decks. And then against Chain, you're able to just play all your cards will block for 3, and then you'll have all these defense reacts and sigils against Chain, so you can try and fatigue them.
Yeah. So in the core deck, How many blues are you sitting at in the core deck in this current list? Then looks like is it?
It's 20. I think it's 26 blues, 28 blues.
Yeah, usually 26,
Yeah,
27.
Like it,
yeah.
It allows you to operate and play that game plan that you're talking about and flex depending on what you're heading into. Obviously, you always want that blue count. You've got a really strong blue count there, and then you're just maneuvering some of this core with your side deck coming in. So, are you always starting with the induction chamber then? Is in every matchup?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, every single matchup. Yeah.
Cool. And is there any particular cards in the core that are a bit different to what you're used to, or is it more that this is just like really solid and where the sort of the meat comes in or the gravy comes in is really with the side deck to add in?
Yeah, I mean the core is just pretty much the same as the core from Nationals last year, and it is just the solid core of kind of exactly what you want to be doing. All of these blue boost cards, mechanologist cards, or whatever items that are very resource hungry, and then a few powerful cards like Zipper Hit. One cost 5 attack, you go again most of the time, and powerful cards like High Octane is just
Yeah. So how often are you guys boosting in this? Are you whenever you're attacking? Are you sort of, is it like pistol, go again, attack, boost, come in with a pistol again? What does it look like generally, the kind of play patterns with this deck on offense?
So a lot of the time, I mean, you're boosting on your high octane turns. Obviously, when you play a high octane, you just start boosting because it doesn't even matter if you miss. On the rest of your turns, usually you're starting your turn by shooting them with the pistol, going again with the induction chamber, maybe doing that again, or ideally a high purifier in there as well. And then it's pretty important to end a lot of your turns with counters up on your chambers and your guns. So generally you want to charge up and then play a booster, and if you miss, then whatever, you pass the turn, you've still got counters on it, everything ready to go again next time. And if you hit, then you get to shoot again as well. So you're generally not trying to play like 2 boosters in a turn or anything like that. It's more just shoot a bunch with the gun, get some good value, go again, and then come in with the gun again.
Yeah, and you're at 48, 49 cards in this main deck, so even once you bring some cards in, you're pretty high to hit, especially since you can bring in a few more mech cards, right? Like you can craft your deck to make sure that you're hitting pretty regularly.
Like, I mean, generally in a 60 card deck, over 50 of your cards are mechanologists. So your chance to hit is usually at least 85%.
Yeah. And a question I think that maybe doesn't actually come up that often, but I think it might be something that people really want to know is, obviously you're starting with your induction chamber, but then if you have your choice of Spark of Genius, what's the order you go for next? What's the second item? What's the third item coming out?
In most matchups, you'll get Purifier as the second item, and then it depends if you haven't played many high octanes in the game and you're wanting to build up a big high octane turn soon, you'll get a second Purifier as well straight afterwards again. Otherwise, kind of just depends on how the game's going to map out for you, whether you get the second induction chamber or the second Purifier first.
Yeah, and the reason you get the Purifier second as opposed to another chamber straight away
is because on the high octane turn, you engage 2 purifiers, and all your pistol shots that you have extra action points for are all coming in for 4, and that's how you do a massive turn with high octane.
Yeah, so prioritize the purifiers afterwards. Oh, okay.
Yeah. If that's what you're trying to do that game, like if you've played no purifiers, if you've played no high octanes yet or whatever, and if your route to victory is, if there's an octane in your arsenal or something, or a tome in your arsenal, and your route to victory is to set up a big octane turn, then ideally you want 2 purifiers on the field. But if you're much later in the game and you know that you're going to want to grind them out, you want to make the most out of your like multi-blue hands, then you're going to want the second induction chamber to grind.
Yeah. Right, and I mean that Plasma Purifier as your second item is obviously more resource sufficient anyway as your second item.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's the core of the deck, guys. Anything else you want to say, or I think we should just jump in and talk about your side deck options and why these certain cards are there and how you're bringing them in.
Okay.
Cool. All right, I'll just move this across a little bit. Kind of see this. Actually, let's just quickly before we move over there. We've got your 4 equipments here. So you only played 4 equipment. You played the Skull Cap, the accelerators, the Foundry Heart, and the Goliath Gauntlet. You said you obviously swapped that on day 2. So why no Nullrun? Why no? I guess any other equipment that were considerations, Visiatronic, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, Visiatronic, generally you need to play if you think there's going to be a bit of Kano. It is quite hard to maneuver through Kano without Visiatronic. I'm a little bit riskier. I think Nick probably would have played a Visiatronic. I know he definitely told me to. But yeah, I just don't expect Kano to do very well in this metagame. And the thing is, with this mid-range deck, because you're just trying to beat so many decks, the slots become so tight. You know, and past metagames, nationals, etc. You know, there was only 8 heroes. There was only so many decks you had to kind of try to beat. Whereas now, you know, there's Chain, there's Prism as well. Yeah, I think that you have to play so many specific cards to get the right 60 or whatever you want in each matchup that the slots just become very tight.
Right. Do you think that's an advantage to playing such a cohesive core like you have there that really does, you know, like Nick said, it can do one job or it can do another job, but all the cards work really well in tandem together? Like, do you think that's a strength of something like Dash now in a format that has 12 heroes, or a format in a few months' time that's potentially going to have 15 heroes?
I think it is, but it's also a bit of a weakness as well. Probably even more of a weakness is that when you're a mid-range deck, you're trying to you're not naturally amazing versus anything, and you're trying to get to just above 50% against so many different things. So you kind of have to target like so many different things, and once there's a lot of different strategies going on that you have to try to be strong against, if you can't have the right plans or enough cards to have the plans against everything, then some things are just going to destroy you, which is what happened to me day 1 versus Dash Aggro and Kano. So
yeah, you end up being sort of jack of all, master of none in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right, guys, should we jump over into your side deck here? So why don't we start with this? You've got 9 red attack actions here in 3 maximum velocity, 3 throttle, and 3 command and conquer. Why don't you guys talk to us about those first?
Yeah, Nick, do you want to?
Sure. Throttle is just amazing because it's just very efficient. 6 for 2. It's really good in the early game, which is where you're weakest. Command's just a good side deck card, just in general against a lot of things, because even though it trades cards, whereas in other decks against things like Bravo, Command isn't very good. But in this deck, it's very good against Bravo because that's what you want to do. You want to trade cards and then slow the game down until you get to more chambers. And Velocity is basically just for Prism. That's it. It just pops their thing. And maybe sometimes if you don't have enough cards decided, you can just put maximum Velocity, because if you boost it, you don't lose anything. And if you draw it, you should block with it. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And then
you've just got a bit of you've disappointed a lot of people out there, Nick, by saying that you're not actually casting max velocity. People, you're not playing it. You've disappointed a lot of people, I think.
I do that a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to add to that by saying that in a competitive event, I have still never cast a maximum velocity in my life. Sorry, max velocity fans.
I've done it at some I've done it at some armories. I definitely haven't done it at any competitive level events, unfortunately. Yeah. Maybe one day we'll get there. I wanted to touch on something, Nick, 'cause I think you made a really interesting point about Throttle being like a really good early game card. Is that just because of the return rate of 2 resources for 6 attack, and the fact that early game you're not sinking blues into your chambers because you might only have 1 chamber out?
Yeah, exactly. You just want to be resource efficient. That's what the deck's biggest aim to do against control decks is, just to be as efficient as possible. But then late game it's not as efficient because you get the same amount of damage out of a blue card, or more damage out of a blue card, I think, than you would from a Throttle. So it's basically just insane in the early game, but late game, because you're so strong anyway, it's kind of just marginal.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. We might just talk down the list actually, and then maybe talk about matchups specifically and how you guys are approaching that a little bit. We can touch on that at the end if you don't mind. So we've got a defense reaction package as well. So you had your 9 attack actions. Now you've got 9 red defense reactions. Some nice symmetry there. But what?
So crisp.
Yeah, it looks very good. So you've got the 3 unmovable red, the 3 fate foreseen red, and the 3 sync red. So talk to us about these.
Yeah, so I guess the you know for decks that defense reacts are good against, obviously the Fates and the Sinks are very good against Katsu, because they're trying to blow you out with these big setup turns, and if you can shut them down with one card, that's their they've usually spent they've usually taken a bunch of damage to get that off and spent that whole turn, and then you're able to just shut it down. And then similar sort of situation with a deck like Bravo. When they want to go off with some big crush attack or whatever, generally they're taking a bunch of pistol shots to set that up, and then you get to shut it down with one unmovable or a card and a chess piece and a fate or something like that. And then you're back. They've taken a bunch of damage, and you're back to that same square where if they want to get another big turn off, they've got to do it again and then get destroyed by the next one of those. Yeah, so I mean, against Bolton and Warrior, we don't really want to be blocking with cards from hand too much, and attack actions and whatnot. So again, it's just kind of a mid-range, the mid-range strategy, right? Of just constantly putting out little bits of damage, and when they want to get something off, they've got to take a bit of that damage, and then if you are able to shut down what they get off, all of a sudden you're back to the same square, but you've done a bunch of damage and they haven't. So
yeah, it really feels like a package into those matchups where you're almost using them to deny them tempo swings. Your opponent's having to try and swing tempo by taking life, whether it be like a warrior opponent or even like Bravo, you said, and then you're actually actively using 2 cards to effectively probably trade for 4 cards and shut that down, and then just get back to what you were doing. I remember something that you actually said to me, Matt, a while ago. I think we were talking about Dash, and you said, into the warrior and the guardian matchups, like when you get like an unmovable into your arsenal, like you feel like in that mid game you feel really secure because that you're starting to take over the game, you're starting to set up your chambers. And I know, Nick, you were talking about this to me at one point as well, actually, that you start to just get ahead, right? Like you can start to feel a lot more confident in your game plan at that point.
Yeah, well, you just kind of feel like you can't be blown out, right? Like in every spot when an aggressive deck like Warrior or Bravo comes in, you have to be thinking about the attack reactions, cards like Pummel or like pump spells out of Warrior and stuff, and you got to be thinking, all right, what's kind of the worst case scenario here? When you're sitting with an unmovable in your arsenal, like all of the worst case scenarios are mostly fine. It's like, all right, this is the worst case scenario. I'm still okay if that happens. Wow. Imagine if the worst thing doesn't happen, then I'm way more than okay,
Yeah.
So it just sort of you just feel very safe.
Nice, we safety blanket, and to I think to point out a good good sort of point to that as well is that just because you have that unmovable in your arsenal, man, doesn't mean you're going to use it, right? Like you want that for the worst case scenario. You want that for the Steel Blade Supremacy turns, these big turns, these crippling crush, potentially with pummel turns. Like these are where you want to be relying on that. But outside of that, I'm guessing you probably want to be like really careful with your unmovables. You only have 3, so they're a tight resource for you.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, as I say, a lot of these decks usually have to take a bit of damage to set that up. So when you only need to shut it down a few times, and all of a sudden they just don't have the life to play with anymore.
Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah. So cards like unmovable, in the more controlling versions, you have to play yellows and stuff as well, because you're outputting less damage. But in the more mid-range version, you're really pressuring their life total. So you only have to do a big unmovable turn a couple of times a game. You only have to shut down their big turns a couple of times because they've generally taken a lot of damage to get them off, and then they might only have 10 life left to play with, so they're not going to be able to do big turns anymore when you're still shooting them for 4 or 6 or whatever it is every turn.
Yeah, too far on the back foot. Cool. All right, let's see what the last few cards here. You've got 3 sigils. What are the sigils for in this deck?
Basically just chain. The sigils were very much, like they're good in some other matchups where you've kind of got a lot of time, you're not boosting, you're not high octaning or whatever, and you kind of just want to draw out the game. Obviously gaining life is a way to make a game go longer, so in matchups that you really want to draw out the game. But the main thing that they run there was for our chain strategy. So in our kind of testing and theory testing and stuff, what we were finding the hardest with Dash was to beat Chain. And so coming up with a strategy to try to beat them. And we sort of thought, well, Bravo seems to be doing quite well against Chain by just blocking them forever. By having a deck full of block threes plus some pretty decent equipment. And then Sinks, Fates, and Sigils. So we kind of figured, well, most of our cards block for 3. Maybe we can board out all of the chambers, board out everything that doesn't block for 3, and then build a 60-card deck of just things that block for 3, Sigils, Sinks, Fates, and some snags, and basically be Bravo, you know. So yeah, that was kind of the strategy that we came up with versus Chain, which worked out for me in the finals of this event.
Yep, cool. And that's where your snags, obviously, that's the reason that these are in here as well. To pair along with that. Yeah. Okay, and then the last 3 cards, you've got 2 Timothy and Dale, which we already talked about in terms of the high octane package. So are you only bringing them in when you want to play a high octane package?
Yeah, we generally play 1 tome in most matchups just because you've got the boots. So on a turn, you can just play a boost, and if you hit, you can play tome and flip the boots, and gain 3 or 4 life and have a really big hand, be able to charge everything up and shoot them a bunch and whatnot. So, yeah, I like to just play 1 in most matchups, and then the second one is for when I really need to rely on big high octane turns to push the momentum.
Yep, and lastly, the Teklo core, the second Teklo core.
Yeah, just matchups where I want to be setting up big turns, and where I don't have to worry too much that it doesn't block. The biggest problem with Teklo core is in a mid-range deck when you're blocking half the time. Getting caught out with cards that don't block is really harsh. But Teklo core is a great card to get into play to help you build things up and help you do big turns, and it's pretty resource efficient in that it gives you 4 resources for 1 card. So when you can get away with it, it's great. But it is still a sideboard card for the matchups where you can't get away with it.
Yeah, cool, makes sense. All right, well, we've talked about your core of your deck, which I think is like really clean, obviously, and is working really well for you guys. And you've got the side deck where you've it's really tight for spots, as you said, but what your plan is to each of these matchups, which we've talked a little bit about. Might just go off to you guys, list a few of the matchups, and why don't you just let us know quickly, kind of what you're bringing in and what the kind of key plan is. So, like, what's your active plan in those matchups? How are you winning the game? If that's okay, we'll just go through some of the top decks, if that's all right with you guys.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Why don't we start with we already talked about Chain, so why don't you just give us the rundown on Chain? So you're bringing in the snags, the sigils, and then I'm guessing the red defense reactions.
Yeah. So red defense reacts, anything else that blocks for 3, and boarding out all of the chambers and anything that doesn't block for 3. Obviously Sinks and Fates because they block for 4.
Yep. Cool. All right. So what about into the Bravo matchup? Obviously, a very popular deck we've seen quite a bit of through the first few weeks of Road to Nationals.
Yeah. So Bravo, you want to be mid-range you control. Because you can just grind and go long with them. The longer the game goes, the more favored you're going to be through chambers and purifiers and whatnot. You just outclass their deck. So you want to bring in the cards that slow down the game. So all of the defense reacts. Things like Command and Conquer because it forces them to block.
Yeah, so you're basically trying to stop them from having good 5-card hands, or at least putting a lot of damage. So if they want to keep their 5-card hand, they're going to have to take the damage to do so, to come back at you, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not really relying on high octane in that matchup at all. I think I usually keep in 1 or 2 high octanes, but and the card's all right versus them. It's still good. It still bursts out a bunch of damage, but it's really unnecessary. Just because I'm not trying to race to the low life totals with them, and if I am, I'm adding some variance into the matchup where they can kind of really hurt me with some well-timed spinals with pummels or something. I just want to kind of take it easy and build up over time and block everything big that they're trying to do and punish them for the damage that they took to set up that whatever big thing they tried to do is.
Yeah, whittle them down. And I don't know if we said this. I might have just glazed over this before, but when we talked about the chain matchup, you are trying to fatigue them. Like that is your route to victory in that game plan.
Yeah. So my plan against this in chain was pretty much not to attack them at all. As to just block with 4 or 5 cards from my arsenal every turn. Arsenal a red 0 to 60 at some point halfway through the game, and then when they get an earth and leave a counter on my gun, and just never attack with it, never care, and then at some point later on in the game when they make their Ursa token, I shoot it, go again, play 0 to 60, kill it, and carry on blocking.
Yeah, kill it for free, which is huge. Yeah, cool. That's a really, I think, like a really cool tip if you're trying to play this deck into chain. Obviously, how to deal with that Ursa token. Nick, why don't we talk about a matchup that I know you're very passionate about this deck, Katsu Control. Oh, you're on mute, Nick.
No, I shouldn't be.
Oh, there we go. There he is.
Oh no, you're not on mute.
You're good.
Yeah, that matchup's as easy as it gets for most matchups in this game. It's just nothing that they can possibly do to beat you because you need 1 blue to do 4 and they need 1 blue to do 2. So, and then they end up being like similar decks. So you're just going to always be able to outpace them. It's just so. It's pretty jokey of a matchup, to be honest.
What cards are you bringing in for that matchup then?
I mean, you can just play full control because most of their hands they can't do much with a full hand because they play so many defense reacts and they can't cut them all, and they're under the pump to do something. So your defense reacts are really strong against them. You can play command and conquer. You can do a lot of things, whatever you feel comfortable with, especially because if it's blind, you kind of just want all the defense reacts and you want some octanes, but. Because you're favored against both matchups, so you might as well just play the cards that are good against both the versions of Katsu.
Yeah, so you'd hedge a bit and bring in the tomes, or maybe one?
Yeah, I just play 1 tome. Well, I just play 1 tome in general, but you don't need multiples because it can be a bit of a hindrance because it blocks 2.
Yep. Okay. What about so if you know they're the aggro matchup, for instance, then does that mean you're bringing the fates and sinks and like you say being just more of a control deck, or are you being more mid range with some things?
Yeah, I like being a bit more mid range because I can make the game go for a lot longer. Fate and sink are just very good against that particular deck, and Octane's very strong because you have time. You have time for them to draw a bad hand because Katsu has a high ceiling, but it also can draw really unplayable hands. So you can just wait it out for an Octane and then eventually just do a big turn, and it's hard for them to recover from that.
Cool. All right, what about Prism? Prism, obviously, Matt, you said that was a deck that you did lose to twice over the weekend, but maybe got a little bit high rolled in some of those. The triple tome turn sounds pretty tasty. What's your general plan in that matchup? Like, are you trying to just be really aggressive to not let them have those big hands, or are you trying to control it a bit more? What does it look like?
No, ultimately, I want to kind of control it a little bit more. I want to be able to just shut down and not take damage, which means that versus Prism, if I can keep my life total high, they can have those big swingy things and they can do a bunch of damage to me and it still doesn't matter. So generally I want to control the game and not take much damage at all. So with all the 6 powers, obviously I can just trade 1 for 1 with any of their cards there, and then without those, any of the heralds, I can usually trade 2 for 1, either 2 cards on the 6 power ones or a sink or fate in a card or an unmovable or whatever, as long as they're only attacking with 2 things per turn pretty much. So as long as I just block those 2 things with 2 or 3 cards, or sometimes even 4 cards if I have to, then you kind of have the time. If they get out some auras, you've got high octane, which laughs at auras because you get action points and you can just shoot them all down. So they can't really swing a game by like getting a bunch of auras into play. So generally, I just want to be able to block that matchup as much as I can, be pretty controlling, and make the game go long where I'll gradually grind them down.
Yeah, you take the advantage. Cool. And what are you bring in obviously the 6 and 10 attacks here? So that's 9 cards, and then you bring in like unmovables or something as well to aid with that.
Yeah, so I'm bringing in the defense reacts, the unmovables. I'm still leaving in a couple of high octanes, just for if they get some auras set up against me, then I can just mow them down. But also, helps with spectral shield tokens as well. I can always just mow them down. I want to just be able to shut down any game plan, anything they're trying to do, which I think Dash is very good at doing.
Yeah, as soon as they might sort of have some of those, mid to high ceiling draws, but if you have the ability to get back into it just by pushing through their auras or their spectral shields or whatever, you can get back to parity, right, and just keep controlling that game as much as possible.
Yeah. So I mean, most of the time they can have some high variance stuff, and they might deal a whole lot of damage to you. But usually your life total is high enough to handle it. Like as long as they don't play 3 tomes and attack you for 30 something, you should be fine.
I'm sure they can't do it every game. Cool. All right, Nick, might default to you for the last one that I think people would really want to know about, which is, Warrior. So Bolton and Dorinthia. Like, how do you feel about those matchups in general, and what are the kind of the key cards that are coming in for those matchups?
Bolton, you kind of have to play defense reacts. Oh, sorry, you can't play defense reacts. You play more aggressive because your deck just plays all attack actions, so you can't really block them. It's not a good idea, so you kind of just have to go ham on them. It's not a good matchup. Like that's not.
Yeah,
let's not kid ourselves. It's not a good matchup with this version of deck because you need to play attack actions in your blues to make high octane more consistent. Whereas in the control decks, you can play all the non-attack actions, and that matchup becomes way easier.
Yeah.
But you can't beat everything, so you kind of just have to go aggro. It kind of works out, 45% of the time, but then
you can race them.
Yeah, and then 55% of the time it doesn't go your way, and that's how it goes sometimes, right? But it's still not that bad. And then Dorinthia is kind of, it depends on their build. People don't respect Dash very much with Dorinthia, and it becomes quite easy for you because they don't play the appropriate cards that are good in the matchup, that make the matchup very favored for them. So I wouldn't be that worried about most Dorinthia builds.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Yeah, it was quite funny. Like we played a Dorinthia deck last season that had a very, very good Dash matchup. And I put out a fab with Matt talking about the deck and everything, and talking about how it beats up on Dash, but it didn't really get adopted. People didn't really play that list.
Yeah.
A lot of people have just played kind of old school Dorinthia, and old school Dorinthia gets destroyed by Dash. So the Dorinthia decks just haven't really seemed to develop. So most of the time when I sit down against Dorinthia, they're trying to do the same thing that Dorinthia tried to do 2 years ago. And if they're trying to do that, and you play a bunch of defense reacts and some chambers and stuff, like they can't afford to block you, so they take pretty much every pistol shot so that they can have their turns, and then you just continuously shut down their turns with defense reacts.
Yeah.
So
maybe people were too busy getting on board some Rhinar Claws builds at that time.
Yeah.
All right, cool guys. Well, thank you guys both so much for coming and talking about the Dash deck. Congratulations again, Matt, on not just the past weekend, but the weekend before, and excited to see what you guys come up with for next weekend. Did want to ask before you guys go, if anyone's taking this to maybe a road to nationals next week, is there any changes that you might suggest making? Or, we just talked about the Bolton match, for instance. So if people are expecting a lot of Bolton in their meta, would you suggest maybe changing some of the blues or changing to a slightly more control-y build maybe?
Yeah, I think I did change. I'm playing one of the blue non-attack non-attacks for Bolton. Yeah. So I have switched that out to help it a little bit, because you only really need to be able to block a few times in that matchup. You don't have to block every turn or anything like that. So I've kind of found Bolton to be all right if I just have a couple more. The biggest thing though is I don't think that this plan we had worked very well against Chain then. But since then, the Chain deck that I won yesterday's event with was kind of a different animal, and if you try to fatigue that deck the way I was fatiguing past Chain decks, it's just not going to work out. You're not going to be able to do that strategy against the new flop Chain decks. So I think, if I was to take this deck to an event again, I'd have to change the strategy quite a lot. So I would cut the snags and the sigils and find a way to be just super, super aggressive in the chain matchup and try to bring their life total down before they get a chance to build up too many shackles.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
definitely wouldn't be trying to fatigue them.
Cool. You heard it there from Matt. Yeah, I heard someone told the person in the finals to sideboard a bit badly, and that might have not gone well for them.
What's that, yesterday?
No, the week before. The week before, I heard someone told that chain player to sideboard not so well. That might have been my fault. So.
Oh, was it you?
didn't know that you were on a fatigue strategy, but I think super good call for that weekend, obviously, and like Matt said, maybe you can go and find some way that's you can be a bit more aggressive in that matchup, or take the front foot with whatever way that might be. I've definitely seen some aggressive dash decks out there over the past 2 weeks. So, all right, Nick, Matt, thank you so much again. Good luck to you guys for next weekend at your road to nationals, and thanks for coming on Arsenal Pass.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having us. Hope people got some value out of this, and get their dash decks going. I do still very much love dash, so great to see it.
Thanks, Matt.